is also a contributing writer at The Atlantic and co-founder of the COVID tracking project. I listen to Alexis on a regular basis, and I feel that I know him already.
Sorry about the flash drive.
So, Alexis, welcome to East Palo Alto. We are honored to have you here, and I
It's a beautiful place to be doing this kind of meeting. I have to say, where I know more about the environmental justice situation in West Oakland, we do not have a building like this. We're in the trailer, the West Oakland Environmental Impact. But I also didn't expect to find myself quite so interested in all your water infrastructure issues here. Like, for better or worse, you have a fascinating situation on the ground, and it kind of sounds like for worse, really. You kind of just want to be able to turn on the water on the tap, have it come out, look clear, smell good, and you can drink it. And that's not what's going on here. And I feel like we want to get to the bottom of it, and that's what we're going to do on this panel. I'm going to start with Heleine McNack. Wanted to give her a quick introduction. She's here. She is doing many things with her life, but she's here as part of the community and just having grown up here and know what the situation is. We've also got the mayor of East Palo Alto, Gauthier. Thank you so much for joining us as well. And we also got some folks who are working on some of the solutions here in East Palo Alto. We've got Max Gomberg, so we're going to hear more from later. Thank you, Max. We've got Feinstein, Sustainability and Resilience Policy Director at SPUR, here to my left. And we also have Cade Cannedy, Director of Programs at Climate Resilient Communities. I want to start off, with you, actually. And your experience of what it has been like to just turn on the tap here in Palo Alto. At your house, at your family's house, all around.
Yes. Hi everyone, my name is Heleine, and I was born and raised here in the Bay Area. I grew up in East Palo Alto along with my grandparents, and I'll speak a little bit about my water. I lived in the village, the last street until you go onto Gomberg on 2 Lane, and my water was good. My dad would say we were too good to drink from the water hose. He would drink from the water hose. But Alexis McNack, who couldn't be with us unfortunately tonight, she's my cousin, and we share the same grandmother's house in the Bay. To give you a placeholder, right where YMCA is, next to Bill Street, and it was the total opposite. You wouldn't dare go in there and turn on the faucet in the kitchen and drink from the tap water. You wouldn't dare go just shower without boiling the water. You wouldn't dare, the water was brown, it didn't smell good, you had to let it run for a little bit, but you just wouldn't trust it, right? And there was non-stop water bottles, drinking, buying water, and we had elderly people, like I said. There was our great-grandmother living there, our older uncles, elderly living there. And so we always had to buy and make sure the water filters were refilled and things like that. But like I said, I was happy to go home because I'll go drink some water at home and be well back there.
And I think what you're saying too is backed up to a lot of the survey work that's been done by Casa too, just that it's high on people's list of concerns, the water, and they're expressing that concern not just in surveys, but buying bottled water, which is expensive. Mayor, how do you see this situation? Maybe you can give us some of the historical context for how we kind of got into this place where East Palo Alto has these kind of different regions.
Here, and thank you, Mr. Costa, for pulling this together. Here in East Palo Alto, we have 3 water purveyors. And how that began, I know the Palo Alto Park Mutual or Connor Park Mutual, they were in place first, and we get their water from the groundwater. And East Palo Alto, the rest of East Palo Alto residents, it was a county contract. We get our water from Hetchy. So there are 3 different conveyors that are providing water to the community. I too am a longtime resident of East Palo Alto. When we first moved here, we lived on Bay Road, so part of the village area. Now I'm in the Gardens area. But even for me, I still filter my water, but I can drink water from the tap.
What role did the very late incorporation of East Palo Alto play in
divvied up the water. You know, East Palo Alto was unincorporated and we were the last to be thought of when they divided the water. Most recently, I know many of the residents remember we had a moratorium on building because we didn't have enough water. So the issues that happened prior to being incorporated led to our water situation and where we are. But we're better now because we were able to get water from Palo Alto and Mountain View. That has helped us as well.
I mean, when I think of another community that actually remains unincorporated, North Richmond, anyone know about North Richmond? I mean, it's easy to draw parallels between there and here. So, I mean, what role do you think the racial segregation of, you know, that period played in, you know, having this set of issues?
Oh, it's a huge issue. Look at our community in the county. We, you know, here in East Palo Alto, that's where the county dump was. If you look at some of the region and some of the infrastructure here, we had roaming where it took some of our young people to close roaming, but that contaminated the ground water, well, the ground area as well. So the whole development of the region has played a huge role. When you think about racial justice, it is, you look at it and you know that this was designed and this is the way it worked. Our infrastructure was not maintained the way that it should have been. So it's led to a lot of the issues that we're seeing today.
Do you see parallels with any other cities like around the country that are having, you know, these kind of issues that maybe have been statistically same kind of historical, structural racism?
Well, if you think about Flint just recently and the issues that they have with lead in their pipes, not only infrastructure that's updated can cause a lot of issues. So you look at some of the areas there are some of the areas in the communities of color that have been dealing with a lot of these issues with getting and conveying and having the right water or having healthy water come through their tap. So we're not unlike some of those cities that are dealing with some of those issues as well.
I also wondered if, you know, as I was reading about these issues, it seemed like some of the issues in the Central Valley that like majority of Mexican communities out there have been experiencing, where they have a private water provider, but they have it with like a private well, and it just is not working very well. And they have to go to state water board to kind of do that kind of fight. Madge, I was hoping you could provide maybe some of that context of when a community decides that they want to do something about the water in their community. What are some of the steps that you've seen from other communities take?
Yeah, so the state, thanks to a lot of activism from local communities, passed a law in 2012 called the Human Right to Water Law. And it sets forth these three core goals: safe, accessible, affordable water. And now we're over 10 years since the enactment of that law. There's been some progress around the state, but unfortunately, across the state, water has been neglected. There are almost 3,000 water systems that serve communities across the state. Most of them are very small. They just serve a few hundred or a few thousand people, and they haven't had the capacity, and in part because of the historical issues of historical social racism. A lot of communities were left out from infrastructure development, didn't get the treatment investments they need. And so we're now seeing a focus and digging out from that legacy of disinvestment. But there are hundreds of systems, hundreds of communities around the state that still lack safe water. And so it really takes strong advocacy from the community. It takes support from government officials that want to be part of the solution and really solve some of these long-standing issues. It hasn't been easy, I will say that, in many places. But there is progress, there's funding now, and there's more support from higher levels of government. We can get into that a little later, but there is opportunity for communities up and down the state, including East Palo Alto, to really take charge and set a course for a healthier water future than there was just a few years ago.
You know, when I think about SPUR, I don't tend to think of water equity as being one of your, you know, like a core issue of SPUR, but maybe you would tell me how you have come into this East Palo Alto?
After meeting the wonderful people at Nuestra Casa about 2 years ago, and they are such a pleasure to work with. They're so deeply knowledgeable about the community and so invested in improving it. And I did bring a professional history of working in water equity issues with me so I got to SPUR. SPUR is probably known more for urban planning issues and housing and so forth. But we do also work on infrastructure issues, and East Palo Alto is such a clear-cut case of how the infrastructure in the surrounding cities is just a step above what East Palo Alto has available, at least in parts of East Palo Alto, I should say. And it really comes back in many ways to redlining issues. The cities around here had racially restrictive covenants that homes weren't allowed to be sold to people of color in a lot of the cities around here. So people of color came here to East Palo Alto, where it was unincorporated. And, during the heyday of federal funding for infrastructure in the 40s to the 70s, this area was unincorporated. It wasn't getting that infusion of money. And then, we get the Reagan Revolution and federal investment in infrastructure tapers down, and lo and behold, EPA incorporates sort of after the availability of funds to build, big water systems, build really great quality infrastructure for their city. So they by coming in late, they missed a lot of the great opportunities that were sitting there for those cities around them.
Cade, your organization works on climate resilience. When I think about East Palo Alto and climate change danger, you think of like sea level rise here. One of my colleagues at KQED, some of you may know him, David Romero, has been reporting on some of those things. What's the climate angles that you see in the water aggregation series here?
Yeah, thank you, Alexis, for that question. I think you mentioned the one that sea level rise is one that I think folks are becoming more and more aware of, the threat that poses this community in particular. But there's been a lot of emerging research recently about the threat of groundwater rise. So when those sea levels come up, they'll also elevate the groundwater that's suspended just below the surface. And that has a lot of potential problems. It could overwhelm infrastructure and render a lot of the pipes and sewer systems kind of obsolete in some respects. It could also mobilize contaminants, which is something that East Palo Alto has a particular concern about. Given the history of redlining, industrialized and racialized zoning practices, there's a lot of contaminated sites in East Palo Alto, and I think that is an issue that really clearly illustrates the kind of ongoing legacy of racism in this country. Atherton doesn't have that problem. Palo Alto doesn't have that problem. It's concentrated here. And while there's still a lot of questions about the risks that groundwater rise might play in whether those risks are big or small to people, those are risks that are being disproportionately borne by some communities and not others. And that's a legacy of racism in this country, and solving it is going to be a multi-million-dollar endeavor that takes multiple communities working together to raise these issues in order to solve them.
Let's lay out as we move. I want to get some community input in here too. But let's lay out just like really clearly what the three water providers in Palo Alto do and what you think needs to be done. So maybe we can go to the mayor. Who may want to answer the mayor, may want to answer as a community member, however you want to answer. Let's get a mic there.
So I will answer that. So the three water purveyors we mentioned in Palo Alto Park, Water Mutual and O'Connor Track. And then we also have the water that comes from Veolia, from Hetchy. I am not in the other two areas that provide the water, the groundwater, so I can't really speak to that. I do hear from residents who have issues with water that comes to their tap, so that's something that we need to look into. What I can speak to is the water that I get is from the Hetchy. But again, I have to reconsider, I have to consider the conveyance and the water and how it's getting into my house and making sure my pipes are up to speed. And we think about the infrastructure and if it hasn't been maintained, if we're losing water or the pipes are old, that can also impact the water that is coming into my home. So being thoughtful of that is something that's important. But for the other two, I just can't talk to them.
Next, I wanted to ask you what sort of policy responses that so far have been considered. Like, what are the possible routes that could be taken here to improve water quality?
So there are a number of routes that can be taken, and they come in different flavors. Some have to do with governance changes that would actually unify all three systems into one. Some have to do with additional technical assistance and funding to fix some of the long-standing contamination problems in the smaller systems, and some of them have to do with essentially better attention to community needs, transparency and communication, and access to resources for issues that are related to water quality, but aren't actually related to the system. So I think when we talk about water issues, right, there's the water, the source water, and how well that's treated, then it goes through a meter and into a building, right? If that building has bad pipes, then you're going to have water issues in the building, and those require a different set of responses. So there are a few different ways, but it all comes down to funding, a proactive approach from government at all levels, local, state, federal, and then sort of actual technical assistance from organizations that work on all these issues.
Well, Lord, you want to provide us some more perspective from the SPUR side of things, or where you're back on water quality?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I feel like I want to just take a step back and say, specifically what we're talking about is the problems we're talking about with water quality are mainly around this issue that the two small water providers, which just serve two small neighborhoods in East Palo Alto, have had a history of problems meeting the taste and odor and color standards for safe drinking water. So what does that mean? From the health standards. So that means that you can drink it, it won't hurt your health, but it does not look good to drink, it does not smell good to drink, and quite frankly, nobody else in San Mateo County has groundwater coming out of their taps, right? So I'm not trying to say it's okay that it doesn't meet those standards. I just want to make clear that people shouldn't feel frightened of their water. These two small systems have had trouble meeting those color and odor standards. And one of them has gotten back in compliance, one of them is still out of compliance, so they're working on it. And I would say one of the most obvious potential solutions, compared to like a lot of the towns in the Central Valley, one advantage of East Palo Alto is that they are right next to a very well-functioning water system. So they could all consolidate, and then you would have all EPA customers getting good, clear, good-tasting water coming from their taps.
And consolidate is like go ahead.
If I can just talk about the groundwater. So even with those two, so recently at the city building, we got some reports of groundwater coming into the city hall building and the library. And that is the water pipe that is from Hetchinky. But the issue, we were flushing the pipes and there were a lot of issues. And I can remember at one point being on the call with Veolia, they were like, it's just groundwater, but it's safe to drink. So my question to the reps at Veolia, would you drink groundwater? Because I don't want to drink groundwater, and I don't know any other community would be drinking groundwater, so don't expect my community to drink groundwater. So they finally fixed it, and we haven't fixed it completely. We just received $2 million from Assemblymember Captain's office that will allow us to change the pipe from City Hall University to Downhill, which will bring cleaner water to the area, in that area as well. But that just went back to issues of infrastructure.
It is just also a tough message to be like, it's not unhealthy, it's just nasty. You gotta when we're talking about consolidate, right? This is kind of like a technical term in this world, right? it actually means like hooking up the pipes in a different way, right? Does that mean that the community would have to pay, or who would pay to like hook up the pipes in a different way?
So I can start on that. So consolidating actually is a whole set of actions even beyond hooking up the pipes, because basically it involves dissolving two of the systems, right? And then you only have one more system. So it involves a bunch of legal and governance changes about who's in charge, essentially, and how you do that. And then, right, it involves allocating costs. The small systems have their own cost structure and their own rates that they charge. The city, through Gilead, has a different set of rates. You have to integrate all that and do it in a way that's equitable so it's fair for everyone. And then the best way to do that, of course, is to get funding from the state or the federal government to support some of those transitions. Because as you can imagine, it's expensive to take an entity that's been there and sort of dissolve it, move those customers over to a different billing system, different hookup. So there are a number of steps involved in consolidation. It has been done in other parts of the state fairly successfully, but it's definitely a process. It requires input from the community that is receiving new customers, as well as the customers of the system that is going to go away. And so it can be complex.
Just a question. Do you just like take a vote in the city? Like, how does this actually happen that you would go do that? Who wants to answer?
There's again, I believe there's a government entity. There's someone in Sacramento that oversees the water, that looks at the water conveyance and those. It would have to involve someone who's
It's like the water board, right?
Yeah, the water board, but it's not just the city. You'd have to go to another entity to have that conversation.
Add to that, oh yeah, there's these interesting entities that just about no one knows about. They're called LAFCOs, Local Agency Formation Commissions. What? And they're actually in charge of the boundaries, the jurisdiction of all the different local agencies, from your mosquito abatement district to your wastewater service provider. So they have a lot of control. They're sort of pretty unknown. They have a role. And then the state water board, where I used to work, also has an important role. They can, in certain cases, order consolidations. They provide a lot of the funding and technical assistance when there is sort of a set of agreements. So you've got a mix, as usual, in government.
Laura, can entities, like say these three water companies, just say like, you know what, this seems like a good idea, we should all just get on board?
Yeah. If everybody is agreeable, they could consolidate. Now, I'm not gonna think that everybody's going
Just
to
check.
volunteer for it, but I think that if community members are showing up and working with the small water agencies and they're asking for that, there's a possibility.
Cade, I wanted to bring you back in. One of our questions from the audience is, you mentioned some of the water sources are using groundwater wells. Where are the wells located, and are they vulnerable to shallow groundwater rise?
Yeah, so everything that I've read so far says that that's not a vulnerability. That the wells that the drinking water is being drawn from are much deeper than the type that would be affected by shallow groundwater rise. But that doesn't mean that that water cannot make its way into contact with you, right? If it's contaminated, it's called emergent, like meaning it's coming up out of the ground. Or if it's just risen high enough that it's in the sewer system, or making its way around pipes and into crevices, that can be a problem in itself. But I also wanted to jump back to what we talked about earlier in terms of the color, and whether and the water is safe, but it looks really bad. And I think that there would be, I think that's partly a question of trust, right? Whether or not folks trust the government. And I think the facts are that when you're in a community that has been consistently build above, that's really something that destroys at a very deep level your trust in these systems. So I don't think it's at all unreasonable for someone to be concerned about their water being brown or to demand that that no longer be the case.
And if I can go just back to the groundwater, we do have a groundwater management plan, which is necessary. Because not only if you draw too much water, you can have an issue of saltwater intrusion, since we're so close to the bay that can contaminate the groundwater as well. So there are plans in place to just kind of monitor that groundwater so that we don't have those issues that impact the water that's going to homes right now.
Ina, as you've been listening, what have you been thinking about giving your work here with the casa and also just, really?
I felt like talking about water providers, I said easily. I'm scared to talk about it because it's not a common thing to talk about. I'm not scared about my water provider, I'd say, but there has been times where I was like, watch what you say about water providers, and the information is not common. It's not accessible to the community. Reports are missing. The community doesn't even know that we have 3 water providers. Whenever I go, they just think that, oh my goodness, where'd you learn that? Who are you? But no, it's like the community, it's not accessible for the community to know where the water's coming from. And so that's why I would say, I don't know where I would stand. But as a young organizer, I've read the long water reports. I've kept me a surveyor, led longer in council meetings telling her about what I've heard from community members. And I remember a couple years back in front of St. Francis, I was a permit project and we had the table around water. And the #1 thing was pipes in people's homes. They were said they had to put whole new pipe systems and it was very expensive. Someone, I think the highest was $15,000, and she said she was a homeowner in East Palo Alto, right off of Willow Road. And she said she couldn't afford it. She had to go in and plan and just fix the front side of her pipes in her house. And she was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with the back side of the pipes. And she was just like, I can't afford this. And so that was the #1 thing was individual house infrastructure. And that's when I went into reading water reports and realized the city's infrastructure isn't really up to date. And so that's where I would stand around the...
No, thank you so much for that, Mark. We've got some community testimonials here of just how people are feeling about the water. I'm just gonna read these basically into the record here. We need to know the water that we're drinking is safe to drink. I would like that the water from the tap is possible to drink and it's better quality. The water is not good and it tastes bad. We want water that is safe and healthy. The water is dirty, we know because we have a filter and it's so dirty. And the flavor of the water is different. It's just kind of incredible to me. Obviously, the community has known about these problems since the beginning. Here's another question. I think this one has to go to you, Mayor. Why is it always the water company's fault? Why can't the city council put in place a water filter ordinance? 60% renters should have the right of quality water. One council person bragged about having a filter on his house.
That is a great question, and you're right, everybody should have safe drinking water. So the question is, why can't the council put an ordinance in place? So the council, I'm thinking that the council that's paying for filters, or the city would pay for filters for...
Yeah, I think that's the question. It's like, why can't you do something about it? Is how I
So
think that
we are doing something about it. We're trying. It is an expensive fix to fix the water. And that's why we have our plans to go through and try to do pipe by pipe, infrastructure by infrastructure, but it's not enough. Again, if you think about water and health equity, water is a right and people need to be healthy and have clean water coming from their pipes. This is an issue that I agree has been ongoing and we have to figure out a way to get it fixed. We have the one area that we're fixing, we have a plan. So if you look at our water plan, we need to get more resources and more money that will allow us to fix the infrastructure, but it is taking way too long. So I don't know if that's getting a loan from the state that will allow us to do more, but I always have to ask that.
Laura, what have we've seen in other communities around there, maybe nobody has this exact water problem, but lots of communities have infrastructure problems. And so what have you seen that has worked to build these kind of coalitions to get the money from the state to do this?
That's actually a really good question. I'm trying to think of a big environmental justice problem that's been actually solved or addressed. I guess maybe
It's a particular matter, West Oakland.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Not solved, but I think one problem where the community has been incredible at getting more resources and more attention is West Oakland with its air quality problems. That is a real model. And I think in the beginning, people really poo-pooed Ms. Margaret and West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project when they were saying that their air quality was bad. Because the way that the air district always measured water air quality was with these monitors that measured it like for the whole city, basically, all of Oakland. And so people in West Oakland were saying, we don't believe you, it is dirty down here. And eventually they got funding to actually go out and monitor their neighborhoods, and lo and behold, the air quality was horrible down in West Oakland. It was totally different from the rest of the city. And they went and I think they worked at the regional level, I think they worked at the city level, and I think that those more powerful entities, I think, really helped get funding from the state to then turn around and are working on addressing a lot of those problems.
Well, I think in that example, the issue of the truckers was like a huge thing because so much of what was happening in West Oakland, right, is there could be all these ships coming into the port, and then all the trucks would have to go down to the port to pick up the boxes and take where they're going to go. And they had the oldest, dirtiest trucks, and so they were able to eventually build this partnership with the truckers that got the truckers some money to be able to replace their trucks. That was one big thing. And then they built a truck route that's kept it away from schools and other things. I mean, there's always that, right? There's a big structural problem, but then there's like all the sub points. Like, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this.
And I can address that again. When we think about the infrastructure, we have had meetings with the state to try to help fix the infrastructure. And what we had to have is a resource that they can leverage for us to get a loan. So we put, there's a bill on our water bill that is allowing us to collect money for the city, and then we can use that as a resource to get a loan from the state at some point that will help us to fix more of the infrastructure. But we have been thinking about that and trying to figure out how and looking for ways to fix a lot of the infrastructure within the city. It is top of mind for us.
This is an interesting question. When you consolidate, if you were to just have one water place here to say everything, what happens to the infrastructure of the private district? I think the question is kind of like, does it get upgraded? Does it get bypassed? Like, what is Sorry, Max,
I think the main thing would be that you could potentially have the water coming from Veolia, which is generally high quality water, coming through the pipes of the smaller water systems and or getting blended with that lower quality water, so that what comes out in the end is clean.
Cade, one more for you. You guys have 10 minutes, so if you want to get your questions, we should get your questions in now. What are the plans in place to deal with natural disasters, say wildfires, earthquakes, flooding, saltwater contamination, that might affect or intercept East Palo Alto's water access?
That's a really good question. I think that there's been a lot of great work that's been going on in East Palo Alto. I'm thinking of our CERT team here, led by Mr. Robert Jones. They're doing a lot of excellent work. I think when it comes to disaster preparedness, disasters that might limit your access to water, I think the most important thing is that in those times, the person who is going to be most able to help you is your neighbor, the person on your street. And so I think that means that really at a fundamental level, we all need to rebuild our connections to one another, rebuild our relationships with our neighbors. And it's hard, it's hard when you're working 2 jobs to make the time to do that. But I think there are things that we can do to make it easier. And I think that it also starts with just knowing that, we're a community. We have to rely on one another in those times. And that what makes us strong is one another. So I think that that's something that we can really look to as a shining light for all of these issues, is that together, nothing is insurmountable. And it's just about getting enough people engaged and mobilized, and enough people speaking loudly enough. And these things do start to move. These things do start to change.
One quick one, and then more complicated one. Can you mention the name again of the assembly member that got some funds allocated?
Sure, it's Assemblymember Diane Kaplan, one of our newest assembly members. She brought a check to the last city councilman meeting for $2 million.
Yeah, that's good news. Here's the other question. What is the data that we have regarding water quality in EPA? And to your point about needing to generate your own data sometimes, I know that just from I want to speak to this. You guys have done some of the testing in the water, right?
There's not, I don't have like specific numbers, but I did do water testing with Ranch Casa, and everything's safe to drink, but there are aesthetics in the water, like groundwater, things like that. But at the end, like conclusion, like water was safe to drink.
And how did you just go house to house?
Yeah, we made sure to go to every different section. So the mid, the G, the village, we went all around OTR, and we did multiple tests in every section, and everything came back clean. It's safe to drink.
How much did it, like when you were taking the samples, like how much did it vary? Like if you line them up on the table, could it have been like, those ones are gross, these ones look okay, I'm not sure about those. Did it vary like that? Did you really see the difference in that one?
Yeah, I can say we've seen them side by side because we took them at different times.
Yeah.
And also Veolia is supposed to monitor water and do testing of the water route. And so there should be a report on their site that talks about the water. I just don't know if they break it down by community.
Here's another question. Sorry, Mary, this is why I put you in the middle, right in the hot seat here. The city of East Palo Alto has more than $120 million in the bank. I have not fact checked this, it's just what's on the card. How can we spend this money on improved water quality?
That is a great question. And when you look at the money, a lot of people think that there's money in the bank, the money that isn't necessarily sitting in the bank. There's money that is to cover retirement, there's money in different accounts that we just don't have access to. So the notion that there's $120 million that we can go and just go and cash out is not the case. But we do have a budget. We do look at our budget and we try to activate that budget to make sure that we're doing the most for our community. And we're always looking for grants and opportunities that will bring additional resources into the community to solve many of our challenges. We have questions.
This is interesting. I'm not sure who's going to want to answer this one. Which pathway to improve water quality is more likely for East Palo Alto? I'll throw some pathways out. More pressure on the private water district, perhaps, to do something different. Consolidation triggered by like a water board kind of body. Nothing at all happens. Filters at individual houses. Like, what are the pathways? Which ones do you think are the most likely to get results?
I don't think we can continue to do nothing. We know that the water issue is there in different parts of the town, so addressing what it is and understanding what the needs are. A lot of it has to do with infrastructure, so how do we repair and fix the infrastructure? And for those who have, if the issue is coming from the street to the house and the house pipes are the issues, are there loans that can help residents to fix those issues so that the water is in a better condition? But I don't think it's time. I don't think we can continue to say that we can't do anything because again, water is a necessity.
More specific question for you. Is there a staff member within the city that's assigned to work like with these water providers?
I believe that's probably, I'm looking at James, I don't know, he probably doesn't know. I don't want to point James out. He's not the person.
James is like running to the bathroom.
The city manager would probably say it's our engineer that is supposed to look over and have access to our water provider.
Hold on, this is also a good question. I'm just trying to read the handwriting more effectively. Okay.
I know, I'm in.
Sorry, we're getting there. Just by default, all the hard questions fall to you. I don't know if one of you wants to address that.
Well, the last time I talked to Rosa and Kelly, I don't think that they had successfully had a conversation with Palo Alto Park Mutual. Yeah, they're just shaking their heads. So they have not been responsive.
I think we're just about through, except for how people can actually get involved in this issue. I mean, Ina, do you wanna go first? How would you, as a youth organizer, how would you get people involved here?
I think it's the responsibility of city leaders and I would say like water companies to make their information accessible. It's not all on community leaders to make information digestible, language access, make everything understandable. And I'd say it's not on our backs, it should be on other people's backs. And I was thinking earlier when we were talking about the groundwater, I was kind of thinking of like, it was a whole social media thing going on where Kylie Jenner took her jet 18 minutes on a flight, but it's on us commoners to get electric vehicles and carpool and things like that. So I would say it shouldn't be on our back to learn about all of this and fix these problems. We shouldn't have these problems in the first place.
But we got it still. So, what should people do if people want to get involved with these efforts here, right? How would they get in touch?
Be a good neighbor when we're sticking ourselves promotoras come to your door. They're not trying to get you to go to church or anything, they're just trying to give you some education. So I'd say be a good neighbor, plug in to community events like this one, and make it over. It might be a little tiring at first, but once you start going and making connections, you'll find some fun in it, like I did hopefully.
There's other levels to it too, though, right? I mean, there's, obviously the community is going to be the most important one, but like, go into the regional spots, right? Working with the people who allocate Hetchy water to like get water brought. Like, where are the other places where people might be able to plug in, or who should they be contacting and be like, hey, we need this like issue addressed?
So, one thing is that I used to sit in meetings with state officials, with people who are appointed by the governor. Community pressure really works. When we sit around and say, well, what's the priority? It's like, well, we've received a bunch of letters and phone calls, and someone got their state assembly member, their state senator to send a letter. People jump at that. It really does make a difference. So once there's community momentum to say, things need to change, our water's bad, one phone call to an elected official's office can really start things moving. I know, trust in government is low, and people have good reason to feel like, oh, they'll never do anything. But it's actually, it's when there is sustained community pressure, it tends to get things done. It's the old saying about the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It is true.
I don't know about you all, but I want to look at the people who cut out the map of all the different little local service providers. I want that like magic map on Google Maps where I can see all the districts. That seems like very important.
Can I just add, you can get involved, and I agree with you. Sometimes elected officials will listen and do what they need to do, but it takes community providers and community-led organizations who are doing the work, who's really making sure that this is coming to our attention, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure there's space with North Casa for others to join this work, and other community organizations. When you think about Roman being closed in East Palo Alto, the state youth at EPA and some of the leaders that came together to make sure that happened. And I look at the room and I see a lot of youth in the room. It's our youth who care, who are passionate, and are pushing this forward. And we need to listen to them because this earth is just not for us, it's for them. And we need to make sure we're doing a better job in our communities, in the region, to leave a better place for the future generations.
Hey, thank you so much to our panel this evening. Thank you so much, round of applause.